Broadcasting from the business capital of the world, this is the Podcast Business News Network.
Hey, welcome back, everybody. Lots of us dealing with stress, a lot of anxiety. How are we dealing with that? And yes, you can do those things like breathing techniques. I'm a big fan of that. Meditation, there's other things that you can do. But let's look at what's actually happening to your body when you're dealing with stress. And she's going to help us with that and give some tips along the way. And I think we're going to learn a lot in the next 25, 30 minutes. She is a licensed therapist specializing in trauma, mental wellness coach. She's a certified trainer in accelerated resolution therapy and so much more. And she helps a lot of people. Marcia Mandel is with us on the program. Marcia, welcome. How you doing today?
I'm doing very well. Thank you so much, Steve. I'm so happy to be here.
Same. Good to have you here. And even before we got on here, I learned a lot, and I just said, let's get on. Let's just go. Let's talk. Before we even talk about stress and managing it, I want to look at your personal life because it was a surprise, and it's a good surprise and awareness for a lot of us. So you at age 57 figured out was diagnosed with autism and ADHD.
Yes, yes. So I just going back really briefly to earlier years, I was actually a musician and doing that through my 30s. And then my children started to, I started to become aware that they were having difficulties and uh, a few things that, among the things that surfaced were autism and ADHD. And I didn't connect with it on a personal level, but through investigating, what was going on with them, which is also what brought me to going back to school and becoming a therapist. I realized that I have some of these traits, but they look different for me. And there was I was doing what I call mental gymnastics. And there was one day a couple of years ago, I just became overwhelmed and I said, I have to get myself evaluated. So I contacted the psychologist that had evaluated my son, not, a few years before, and went to her and was not surprised to get those diagnoses. And it actually solved so many questions of my whole life.
And I'm hearing more and more of this of adults being diagnosed. More times than not, it's children, but adults figuring it out, putting the pieces together. Um, what once you were diagnosed, was it medication? Where did you go from there?
Um, First was, I knew it was coming, and I knew, but I didn't know, until it was confirmed. And when I told my daughter, she said, "I'm not surprised." Everybody, both of my kids who are adults now, they both knew it. I went through a period of adjusting, and I had been reading books on women late diagnosed with autism because I had had a client actually a few years before, which probably, I'm sure, planted a seed for me to look into it. Yeah, it's been unmasking, connecting the dots, a lot of reflecting on just my history, choices, friendships, lack of friendships, um, just everything, I masked and I compensated.
Yeah, so you were not being you all those years because you were making up for the challenges that you have behind the mask so that you could function. I call it normally. I don't want to use that word, but so you got along. You moved life forward.
Yeah, I feel the same way about the word normal because we're all unique. And yeah, I mean, I didn't know that I was masking. I didn't realize it until I started looking back. And I remember, even being in second grade, looking at a group of kids, a group of girls who were talking to each other and thinking, what are they doing? I didn't understand it. But I just did what I thought I was supposed to be doing. And I connected with people through music a lot. And that's, I think, part of what masked the difficulties.
I want to share with you, and I just learned this, kind of surprising. Do you remember the group, the Talking Heads?
Yes,
Had this big song "Burning Down the House," "Once in a Lifetime," "Take Me to the River."
yes.
They're re-releasing
David Byrne.
David Byrne, exactly. They're re-releasing their concert movie, Stop Making Sense, like I don't know, 40 something years later, whatever. But he just did an interview recently and revealed that he has autism. Now, might not be officially diagnosed, but he's pretty sure he has it. And I'm making this up. I'm sharing this because of the music connection.
Yes.
He's a brilliant musician and kind of extravagant and just, expresses himself in many different ways. But it's music that guided him through all these years and brilliant there too. So maybe there was a connection there for you musically as well.
Yeah, there is a neurodivergence, and with creativity and art, um, there is, it's hard to put into words, and I don't think it could really can really be put into words. Just the way connections are made in the brain and the complicated networks of knowledge and what we learn and how we put things together. It's so unique for everybody, and it's not surprising that there are those connections.
Hmm.
Yeah.
I'm surprised that you have all this background specializing in trauma. You're a therapist, a wellness coach, on and on and on, and you were diagnosed.
I
It
well, I It actually makes perfect sense when you look at it. So the first part of my half of my life from where I am now, it was music. It was, that was my passion. That's what I was engaged in. And then when I got interested in psychology, I saw my daughter, I saw people doing early intervention therapies with her, and I was just fascinated, and I just got very into all things about the brain and neuroscience. Started working in the field, and drifted to, or went towards trauma. Just found that really fascinating and what happens in the brain and body. And then I found accelerated resolution therapy, and I did all the training with the developer of that. So that's my trauma therapy. But the mental wellness, way before I was diagnosed, when I was just struggling with my children, my home life, and I knew that I had to do something, or else I was going to really kind of fall apart because of the stress that was happening.
Hmm.
And I started reading about mindfulness and self-compassion. There's a book, The Mindful Path to Self-Compassion by Christopher Germer, and I remember years ago reading that book, trying those things, and just it was like a whole other world opened up. And I started recognizing my own distortions in thinking. For example, a lot of parents have this, they have this thought, I have to fix my kids. And people are not even aware of having that thought, or my child has to be happy. I can't let my child suffer, or things like that. And the fact is, it's not in any, none of us have the ability to fix another person. We can love them, we can be supportive, we can be understanding, but we can't go beyond that. And every human being is going to have pain in their lives. So we want our kids to be able to experience that pain and manage it the best they can. And instead of turning away from it as parents or trying to get rid of it, the best thing to do actually is to hold that space with your kids and be present with them while they go through whatever they're going through. And that's how they learn.
Yeah, yeah, you can't fix them. You can help them.
Right, right.
But it can be heartbreaking because it's your child. You want them happy.
It can be heartbreaking. And so I use a lot of these skills of checking my language. Like, my heart's not broken. My kids have pretty extreme, pretty difficult challenges. I don't have a broken heart. I love them. And there are a lot of wonderful things there. And I'm sad for the struggles that they have. And I'm sad for my younger self that I went through a lot of things that, on one hand, it was so difficult. I wish I hadn't been through those things. And on the other hand, I would not have a fraction of the insight or knowledge that I got through this difficulty.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's the traumas that we talk about, which you help people through or recognize what happened in childhood. And I call it the same thing, connect the dots, because I did the same exact thing. I had hypnotherapy last year. And I even said to the practitioner, take me back to my childhood. And it's not that it was bad or anything, but I knew and I already connected the dots. And it was impactful and it's, all part of the journey. Um, but it's amazing that, your journey is, I have to say, amazing, really. I mean it.
Well, it's an ongoing thing, and the journey never ends.
Yep.
You know, as far as my awareness will be.
Yeah.
Um,
It just goes to show, even with your background, that you were diagnosed later in life, just a few years ago. Did you have a gut feeling for many years that I probably have autism or I probably have ADHD?
I did not connect the ADHD. I suspected because I knew that I daydreamed in school,
Hmm.
and nobody knew it. You know, girls typically are more quiet about it, or at least used to be. People who have the hyperactive form of ADHD tend to get more attention because of their behavior. So nobody saw what was happening. I remember just hearing that I could have been doing better than I was, and it was I didn't know about overcoming frustration because either I just did it easily or I didn't do it, um, or I would give up easily because things came very easily for a long time. Um, See, now I lost my train of thought already.
No,
But
I want to ask you, based on what you said, daydreaming in school,
oh
did it
yeah,
feel like you weren't there? Did it feel,
yes, and this is something that is a normal human state that we dissociate, which is on a big spectrum, and we daydream. Our minds go someplace other than the present, and our visual cortex is someplace else, bringing back memories or whatever. Um, our sensory systems are they're not focused on the present moment, and you can't tell. But if you find yourself, when you find yourself saying, I'm sorry, could you repeat that, please? Over and over again, or just, I didn't catch that. Did you catch that? Um, but yeah, and I suspected, I knew about anxiety, that I had anxiety. And for years, that's what I called it. And I didn't realize one of the roots was autism, because the anxiety came from not understanding what is going on as people are, with these friendships. Like I had friends, but there was a limit to the connection, you know. And it's funny, I have a colleague who was also diagnosed with autism, and we understand each other very well. And my kids and I, my daughter, it's a whole different kind of communication. But yeah, I mean, the autism piece I did not put together until probably after I saw that client who was in her 40s and
wow.
had children, late diagnosed. And then I started recognizing my own challenges. And I thought, I have to figure out what is going on here. And I have like the signs of ADHD with organization and planning and sequencing, task initiation, all those executive function,
Hmm.
challenges, they're all there.
We're gonna talk about the stress and how it affects your body in one moment. I want to ask you a quick question. If anybody suspects that they may have those challenges or their child, where do you go from there? I hear all different things about in terms of testing, evaluation. What's your suggestion?
That you find a practitioner who specializes in evaluations for that particular issue. because people can see another, people in the field, in the mental health field, can see somebody with autism, with ADHD, and not recognize it because it looks so different, because all of everybody's, other traits are so unique. So it expresses itself differently. And autism is an unbelievably complex spectrum.
Mm.
And many people have traits of it, but maybe wouldn't be diagnosable. There are many people undiagnosed walking around, not aware that some of their challenges in their lives are connected to autism. But definitely with your child, the worst thing, and what I have seen, is people in denial about their child. That this is going to ruin, cause a big problem for them. The big problem is not looking at the challenges and trying to identify what are the challenges and what can I do to help my child.
Mm. And many times I see it where a doctor may be treating a teenager for, let's say, depression, anxiety, which is very common now, very, very common. So it's a mental health crisis for teenage girls at this time, according to the CDC. But many times doctors will say, "Well, you know what? I'm just going to put you on Adderall. I'm just going to, yeah, let me throw you some meds there," where there's no true diagnosis.
Yeah. Well, some people do really need medication, but the medication is addressing the symptoms. It's not getting to the root. And we started to talk about stress in the body and trauma a little bit before. A lot of the anxiety and mood challenges are rooted in trauma, and trauma meaning, again, a huge spectrum. So just like you had mentioned before, you had a good child, there was not anything,
Wasn't great.
outright.
Wasn't
It
great.
wasn't great, but
It
but it
wasn't.
wasn't there wasn't like an obvious like traumatic event that was going on, or well, I don't know.
You know what? Well, you know what? It depends on how you view it. I was
Right.
bullied. My parents got divorced when I was very young. Yeah, things like that. I was overweight. So,
Hmm.
I would call them some traumas there.
Yeah, and this is the stuff that I believe teenage girls and all the other teenagers and children and adults would benefit from understanding the effects of these experiences. I've had a lot of adults in all decades of life come in because of anxiety. For example, at work, they're uncomfortable in meetings. They feel intimidated. They have a lot of anxiety, and we do accelerated resolution therapy, which it works with the memories and the images from the past. It's a bottom up therapy, so it's different from talk therapy.
Gotcha.
Um, so what comes up is bullying for a lot of people. And the bullying, you're a little kid, or you're a kid, you feel threatened. And the part of your brain that's connected to these emotional responses, the amygdala, it's like you could call it the fight or flight part of the brain, but it's all emotions and emotional memories. It's involved with those. That part of the brain says, I'm going to remember everything about this situation. So if anything reminds you of it again, I'm going to put you in fight or flight mode, and that's going to keep you safe. And here's a way to explain this. So, a couple of examples. When, we didn't come into the world knowing, for example, that if you walk on ice, you could slip and hurt yourself. But after you do that once, when you see ice again, your brain says, be careful.
Which happened to me. It was a long ago, 20 something years ago. It was raining out, but I didn't know it had iced over previously. So I just ran to my truck at the time and bam, went down, knocked myself out, split my head open all down here.
Oh
So
my God.
right. And I can actually see inside my head. But you're right. Now, whenever I see ice, I'm like an old man. Like, I'm not taking any chances.
And the thing is, that's that part of your brain that does that. This is how we learn to be careful crossing the street, watch out for brake lights in front of us. Every single thing we have learned about that we weren't born knowing, is the way our brain holds on to memories. And those the events which are, threatening or dangerous get held by that part of the brain, and they're not integrated like other memory. They're held with the images, the emotions, the body sensations, so that when we think of those memories, we go, oh, we feel it,
Sure.
because that's a more primitive part of the brain and there's no timestamp there. So the memory, you think of it, it feels like it's happening now. So a lot of people think their anxiety or, whatever the problems are having, that there's something wrong with them. This is, your brain is doing exactly what it's supposed to do. You're having anxiety attacks in your meetings at work because your 11-year-old self is stuck in that moment in time when she was bullied. And with accelerated resolution therapy, we go back and people can rescue their younger selves and bring them to the present. And I know we didn't talk about going into this topic, the accelerated resolution therapy or ART, but it's absolutely amazing you can actually eliminate troubling images from that have been stuck in your mind. You can either desensitize to them completely or eliminate them or change them with this therapy.
And it's not like when those situations come up, Marcia, that you're seeing those images. It's in the back of your brain.
Oh yeah. And anytime if we have this uneasy feeling, let's say you're walking around someplace and all of a sudden you're feeling uncomfortable, your unconscious mind is putting pieces together and saying something is reminding me of this thing from the past, and you have no conscious awareness of it.
Wow. Um, well, we were talking about stress, but this lies into it because this is what's going on when you feel that stress. With with ART, can you help pretty much anybody? Could it be a teenager, adult, everybody?
Yes, it's effective from children, and there's no upper limit. I have had ART sessions with people in their 80s, resolving things that were from 7 decades prior. Um, and people come in, for example, a teenager who has a fear of leaving the house because they are afraid of vomiting or seeing somebody vomit. That's connected to a past experience. With ART, we process and resolve that memory in one session, and it's done. And I know it's unbelievable. The developer, Lainey Rosenzweig, has a book, Too Good to Be True, and that's what we hear all the time.
I was just
Um,
going to say that.
well, before I learned, before I really started using ART, I was skeptical. I couldn't believe it. I was using other kinds of therapy to help people with phobias and trauma, and things resolve just instantly in
Hmm.
many cases because I'll tell you a little bit about how that happened. So let's say somebody got into a car accident, they have a driving phobia now. By seeing the accident and calming the body, and we use eye movements in this therapy, we calm the body, we go to the memory, bring up the emotions and the body sensations and the images, and we use these eye movements and release the trauma from the body. And we go back and forth. It's a very specific protocol. That memory is no longer stored in that part of the brain. It's no longer a threat. So the person can think of that accident after one session and they see it differently. They feel completely differently about it, and it feels like it's in the past.
Wow. Can that be done virtually?
It can. It can be done virtually. The developer has a very specific way that she endorses. I use art virtually every single day in my practice, and hundreds, if not thousands, of other art clinicians do also. And it's really amazing. And another passion is to spread that therapy to other clinicians. I train clinicians in basic and advanced ART, and I can put trainings together for practices in really any place, but especially in the New York area. Um, so that's people. I just had a training last weekend, and the clinicians they come in saying, I can't, it's kind of hard to believe, too good to be true. They learn about it, they see the videos, they start doing it, and then we have the practicums. And during the practicum sessions in training, which I experienced too, um, the clinicians then say, I get it. I get it.
Wow. Would you, and we'd have like literally a minute left, but would you say, or what percentage, let's say somebody's dealing with stress, anxiety, there's maybe they have social anxiety. What percentage would you put on it that it's coming from a past trauma?
Um, Extremely high. So the thing is, all of our reactions come from our past experiences, our environmental history, and genetic predisposition. But if something didn't happen to you, you wouldn't have that anxiety. There had to be an environmental contributing factor.
Well, there you go.
So, yeah.
So
So,
we're like 90 something percent.
um,
If not
you
higher.
know, it has to be you need the genetic piece, the predisposition, and you need the environmental factor. So it's kind of you need yes on one and yes on the other, or else there's not going to be a problem.
Gotcha. Gotcha.
Yeah.
And when you say the genetic component of that, can you give an example of what that might be?
Yeah, so I would refer people to a book by Robert Sapolsky called Behave. He's a neurobiologist. But yeah, it's just, we all have unique profiles. We all have unique fingerprints and faces. We all have unique neurochemistry and anatomy. And, some of us come into the world. So, for example, if your mom had a lot of anxiety when you were in the womb, you were, as Robert Sapolsky says, marinating in stress hormones, and that would predispose you for anxiety.
Wow. Interesting. I know somebody that adopted two children and they're in their teens now. She had a lot of anxiety. Her mom had a lot of anxiety. Now her daughters have it in different stages because they were exposed to it. Because it's been
Yeah,
that's my view. Because what are the chances of these two separate girls coming from different parents being adopted having anxiety because it was in their world?
yeah. Well, the fact is, every single human being has anxiety. It's
Sure.
it's it's just how it expresses itself, and to what extent. But seeds are planted very subtly. So a parent says, "Oh, well, you can't go out like that. Put something else on." The seed is planted. Oh, I might be judged, or that's bad if I do that. Oh, why didn't you get a 90 instead of a 70 on that test? You know, the seeds are planted very,
Yeah. Yeah.
subtly.
I look back and say, I wish I knew all of this when my kids were younger.
Me too. I
Yeah.
learned it along the way.
Yeah. Because it's not that we weren't great parents or aren't great parents, but we would have changed our language, our wording, knowing that we're making an imprint on them. And even could be even just joking around.
That's right.
You know, you don't mean it. You're just having fun with your kids, but you're sending signals, messages that could be not always, but perceived in a certain way. How do we find you, Marcia?
Well, I have a website, marshamandel.com, and I also building, and it's there, it's still kind of in construction, but mentalwellnesslifestyle.com. Because when you say, I wish I knew that, it would be great if people knew this stuff that, yeah, if you're joking with your child and you say, oh, come on, I'm just kidding, um, that can have an effect. The past is not just the past. A lot of times people will say, oh, the past is the past, that's over and done. It's not. Our brains, you could never learn anything in your life if the past was just the past. We carry it with us.
Just like we're all energy, I believe, and energy knows no time and space, neither does your subconscious,
Yeah,
unfortunately. And it loves you, it's trying to help you, but doesn't always do what you want it to do. It just does what it thinks it should do. Uh,
that's right.
I have to say, Marcia, it was charming. And I've never said that before to anybody talking with you.
Well, I have to tell you, this has been a great conversation, and I just love these topics, and I really appreciate your engagement in the conversation. And
Oh,
you know,
I've learned so much.
oh,
And what a story that you need to share with many more people because you express it so well. Uh, it's just amazing. Later in life, first of all, you don't even look close to 60, but aside from that, later in life, realizing all these things, I think it's an eye opener for a lot of us, especially with your background and it still got diagnosed that way. So yeah, something to be shared for sure. I want to tell everybody, Marcia Mandel, MANDEL.com is your website, right?
Yes, and it's MARSHA.
Thank you. Final question before they cut us off. Insurance, you don't accept, you do.
Just Aetna. Everything else, I can provide super bills for therapy clients that they can get reimbursement if they have those benefits. And the coaching is a whole other thing that's
Got it.
not covered. Yeah.
Excellent. Thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you so much. It's really been a pleasure.
Same. We'll be right back.
Broadcasting from the business capital of the world, this is the Podcast Business News Network.